Hi there, everyone, and welcome to Paper Wishes Weekly Webisodes. I'm Sarah Newman, and I'm excited to bring you another episode of Mixed Media the Paper Wishes Way. This week, we're going to create metallic effects with gilding. Now, gilding is a very old and traditional technique that involves applying gold leaf onto a surface. So you might think of gilt-edged picture frames in museums. But these days, we have something to make the technique a lot easier and a lot less expensive. So this week we're going to be using the Copper Kettle Gilding Flakes kit from Creative Expressions. And this includes a pot of copper gilding flakes, an applicator sponge, and some specialty adhesive. And this is going to give us a beautiful texture and shine. Now, as a medium, it works beautifully on fabric, glass, ceramics, and of course, those wooden picture frames. It's truly a multi-surface medium. But for now, we're going to stick to pattern paper and chipboard because it is really such a fun and easy way to create a beautiful and unique look on your handmade cards. So as you can see, we have a lot to explore today, so come play with us. Let's start with our first project. So here I've got gilded pattern paper edges, I've got some gilded chipboard accents, and even a little bit of metallic here on my middle area. So I have three very simple techniques to explore. So let's get started. Now the first technique I want to share with you is creating the gilded chipboard. So let's get our supplies sorted. First of all, I'm going to work with the Foliage for Your Flowers chipboard collection. Now, these are chipboard elements that just pop right out of the background, and they can be altered in lots of different ways. Now, when you choose your chipboard pieces for gilding, I'm going to suggest that you start with images that have lots of surface area and not so much intricate detail within each of the images. So, for example, here, the lace and doily set has lots of very fine innies, and I found that it was a little bit trickier to get them to gild effectively because the adhesive and the gilding flakes would tend to get stuck in those little innies. Now, I'm still going to be using these, of course, on a project that I'll show you later today, but with a different technique. So keeping all of that in mind, I've got my image from the foliage set. Now I've left the leaf in the backing piece, so I just chopped that out with a pair of scissors. It's quite easy to cut, but this is going to give me kind of something to hold on to while I'm doing the gluing and the gilding. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is apply the flake and glitter glue, then add foil, and then buff it to refine it. So a couple of things. Now, when I grab my glue here, what I want to do is decant a bit of it onto a piece of wax paper that I have taped onto my craft sheet. And this is just going to keep things a little bit less messy. This is not a normal glue. This is a special adhesive designed so that it doesn't dry until you put the flake onto it. So basically, I'm going to make a kind of an ink pad, if you will, for my glue. So I've got the sponge from the kit, and what I've done is simply cut it in half. It's a pretty big sponge. I've cut it in half so that I have one side for applying my glue, and then I also have the other half, which I can use to buff and refine my gold leafing when I have this on here. Now, you can use your finger to apply the glue to the surface, but it does get pretty messy, okay? So what I'm gonna do is get some glue onto my sponge, not a whole lot, you don't need to saturate it, and then I'm just going to tap it onto my leaf here. And I'm taking care to get that glue onto the image. I'm not worried too much about going around the outside edges because, of course, I'm going to just pop this out when I'm all done. Okay, so I'm just applying this all over here. Then I'm just going to leave my sponge kind of gluey side up because I can continue to use this for a while. Okay, now here's the next part, getting it not to stick to your finger. The next part of this is to let this kind of get tacky. So you need to let it wait. Usually takes a couple of minutes, but you can actually set it aside for a pretty long time. I often go get a cup of tea or pop in some laundry while I'm waiting, but do definitely give it at least a couple of minutes. You'll want it to turn tacky, so you can kind of touch some of the outside area here where you may have gotten some of that adhesive, just to touch it and see how it's going. But definitely Do give it a couple of minutes, let that set up and get tacky, and then you can apply your gilding flakes. So while this is setting up, let's take a look at those beautiful copper gilding flakes. With this kit, you get a 20 milliliter pot of copper flakes. Now these are hand cut and mixed, and you have a really gorgeous quality. Now, a couple of things to know before you open your little pot. First, I like to keep a piece of copy paper underneath. This is kind of like with embossing powder. This way you can catch any of the excess flakes and just pop them right back into the jar. There's a little sticky tab, a clear one, that's on the side of the pot, and you'll need to remove that and then slowly untwist the top. Gilding flakes are extremely thin and lightweight, and they can fly around. So do be sure that you have closed the windows, turned off the air conditioning, and definitely try not to sneeze because they can fly everywhere. Now you're going to have some large pieces. Let's see. Here's a really nice big piece here. You'll also have some smaller pieces in here as well. Now you can use your fingers, but I like to use tweezers to apply it to the surface. You can start with a little and add more as you go because a little of this goes a long way. Now this is just a 20 milliliter little pot. I understand that Paper Wishes has a bigger pot of flakes available too. I think you can see that I need to top up my stash because I got to gilding and just couldn't stop. So it can be a bit addicting, even as your little pot is going to take you a long way. Okay, let's take a look at our leaf and see if we're ready to gild. Now I let this get tacky. I waited, probably 15 minutes or so. And sometimes you'll get kind of a bluish cast when the glue is still, too wet to use. So you may just take a closer look at that and just kind of see if you are ready to go. You can wait a lot longer than you think you can wait. So if you even let this set overnight, you should be fine. So definitely give it more time than you think you need, and that will ensure your success. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit of this beautiful copper flake with my tweezers. I'm going to kind of hold this down and then just sort of tap this onto my leaf. Now I've popped the leaf, as you can see, out of the backing sheet, and that means that I'm not wasting any of my gilding flake on any excess gluey areas. Okay, so I'm just tapping this on here. You can be a bit more generous if you want to. Remember, all of the excess is just going to go back into the pot. And you can also take some of those big pieces and tear them apart. Now I've got some of my leaf on here. I'm going to grab that second piece of sponge. This is not the one that I used for gluing. It's the one that I set aside just for doing my refining. You can smooth this down with your finger if you want to. I like using the sponge though. That just makes it a lot easier. And then just kind of scuffle that around on here. You do want to be sure with some of the more delicate parts of your chipboard, of course. And there we go. So you can see how that has created just a beautiful shine on here. Got some little detail areas I need to refine. And you might just flip it over too and take a look and see where you have some excess gilding flake that you can maybe pop off. And then just continue to use the sponge on here until you've got all of the excess flake off. And then you have a really beautiful image. And I love how the copper looks. It's not a high shine like a metallic that you might get with embossing powder or some of the foiling techniques we've looked at before. It's just really lovely and distressed. Now there are a couple of other ways we can add gilding to our paper. So let's take a look at that. You can see my gilded chipboard embellishments here, and I just love this soft metallic effect. It's not a really high shine effect. It's something a bit more soft and subtle, and it works beautifully for a distressed look. Now, of course, adding some gilding around the outside edges of your pattern papers is also going to add to that effect, and a great way to work in some mixed media techniques. So let's take a look at how to do the edging on our pattern paper. I'm going to move aside my card. You can see that I've got my piece of wax paper, the same one I used before, with my glue on here. I added a little bit more on here as well. Got my folded piece of paper, and I'm just going to bring in a piece of that pattern paper. Now I'll use my same still gluey sponge. I'm going to use this for all of my gluing, and then just pick up some of the glue on the sponge. And similar to how you would edge a piece of paper with an ink pad, it's going to be the same effect. So I'm just going along this one edge. If I was doing all four sides, I could do them all in one go. But as with our chipboard pieces, now I just need to let this set aside and get tacky. It's not going to take quite as long as our chipboard piece because I'm not covering such a large surface area. But what I want to do is kind of pop it up on top of something, a small jar, and then that way it's not going to stick to everything else. So I'm going to set these two elements aside, well out of reach. And then I also want to show you this area in here because I think you can see if I'm tilting this that I've got some shine going on this background piece here too. And this is a really fun technique as well. So for this, I'm going to bring in another piece of that beautiful paper, and I'm also going to bring in my Tim Holtz Distress Splatter Brush. And what I want to do is just pick up some of this leftover glue. Might need to top that up a little bit. Add a little bit more in here. Give this a nice big squeeze and get the rest of that glue out. Okay, and then just pick this up with the bristles of my brush. And I can tap, I can drag, I can do any kind of simple mark making or pouncing on here just to get that glue on my background sheet. Now this is a very, very subtle effect. So once again, I'm going to let this sit and get tacky. It won't take very long because I didn't use a whole lot of glue for this. Now, of course, with the bristles of my brush being a bit gluey, I want to pop this into a jar of water straight away so that I don't get that all gluey and stuck. Okay, so I'm going to set this piece aside as well. And then I'm going to go back and take a look at my edged piece. I'm going to move this over to one side. And then again, open up my piece of scrap paper here. I'm going to move aside my gluey wax paper. And I can reuse this, so that's not going to go to waste. Put that over to one side. And then as before, carefully getting out my copper gilding. Now again, you can use tweezers or you can use your finger for this one. What I'm going to do is just reach in here and tear some of this big, beautiful copper leafing. And then start applying it onto the edge of my paper. Now what I can do is just tap a little bit. I've got this stuck on my finger, so I'll put that there. You can see where it can get a little bit messy. And just tap that on. Now I've got my still kind of coppery sponge here. So what I can do is sort of drag that along there. Now it's a little bit tacky on the back too. So I'm just going to add some more flaking on here. And then turn the sponge and kind of refine that. And you can see just how beautiful that effect is. It's so pretty. It's so simple to do. And again, you can go around all of the edges of this and create a really beautiful matted effect. You can see though that this gold flake really does stick wherever you've got it. So do take care with that adhesive. Okay, now I'm going to bring back in my other piece that I've had added some glue along the center, and let's see how we're doing with that. Now I've got some flake on my sponge, and so I'm just going to scuffle this on here. I don't need to put down huge pieces because I know I didn't have a whole lot of adhesive on here in the first place. I can actually just use the sponge that's already got some of that on there. And I think you can see that I'm getting a really pretty effect with just some very slight bits of metallic shine on here. So it's another nice way to kind of add some coordinating effect onto your various cards and other paper crafts. Okay, so I'm going to carefully get my gold my copper flakes back in here, pop the lid on securely, and then I'm going to move all of this aside and bring back in my card so we can take another look at this. Okay, so once again, you can see on here, I've got my combination of pattern papers. So I've got my edged piece here. I've got my kind of spattery metallic piece here, of course, my chipboard. I'm also using the Noble Expressions word die, and this has a nice layered effect on here. I've got it up on some foam tape, and I've got some dazzles kind of poking out on the sides here. Now on the inside of my card, you'll see that I've carried through this theme. I've got a lot of gold, a lot of copper edging on here. Got a lot of it here in the center as well. So the more adhesive you use, of course, the more coverage you're going to get. You can get some really nice solid coverage on here as well. I have some more chipboard elements. Now these are from the Clocks and Gears chipboard set. So I have some little gears and I've got the key on here as well. Okay, so I have one more project that I'd like to share with you, and this one involves a bit more media mixing as we add in some opal polish. This is the Foundations 6x8 album from 49 and Market. It's a really nice sturdy album and it's got 6 attached inner black pages. Now, of course, you can position it to be vertical, but I really love it going horizontally too, especially if you want to put in landscape photos on the inside. Now, you'll notice that I have my gilded edging going around the outside of my pattern paper, plus some gilded chipboard from the foliage set. Now, I've also got some flowers from the oval wreath chipboard set. And I gilded these with copper, but realized I'd had some areas that I missed while I was doing the gilding. So to cover that up, I used some of my favorite Golden Glow opal polish, and that just added a little bit of shine around the outside edges. It covered the white, and I love how it gave another layer of metallic shine. So this is a great technique to keep in mind as you're mixing your metallics. So let me just show you this process really quickly. I've got one of my gilded chipboard embellishments. All I need to do is use the enclosed sponge in my opal polish and just dip this in here and just carefully go along the edges or wherever I want to go with that sponge. And that will give me a really beautiful kind of a two-tone effect. I think sometimes we're trained to think of using only gold or only copper, but you can definitely combine your metallics too. Okay, I'm going to bring back in my album here, and you can see that I've also used some of that opal polish on this beautiful lace chipboard border. Now remember, we looked at that earlier in the webisode, and I said I didn't do any gilding on it, but I did use something else, and that was the opal polish. I've got some opal polish kind of spattered onto my middle area here too. And I've also kind of swooped it across this black die cut word happy. Now this is from a happy birthday die cut set, but I just used the word happy and added a light touch of gold. So with today's webisode, we've really added to our stash of mixed media techniques with a fun and easy twist on the traditional art of gilding. We're adding depth, texture, and shine to some of our favorite surfaces, and I really hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for being a part of the Paper Wishes family. We're so glad that you're here with us, and I can't wait to see what you create. Do be sure to leave a comment. We love to hear what you think. Each item can be purchased separately, and you can see them below. However, we've also bundled them into a creative money saver just for you. For the money saver, just see the webisode on paperwishes.com.